Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices is made possible in part by Allstate, the Searle Funds at the Chicago Community Trust, and CIBC.
Good evening y bienvenidos to Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices. I'm Michael Puente, reporter with WBEZ Chicago. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, a city watchdog report casts doubt on the utility of surveillance technology ShotSpotter in fighting crime. Chicago public school students return to in-person learning on Monday. We hear from a few CPS parents about COVID safety concerns and more. And untold stories about Frida Kahlo in a new exhibit featuring more than 20 of her original pieces.
There's a future here where our economy will grow if we give and invest and support our Latino entrepreneurs.
And a business school dean gives la última palabra on why he believes supporting Latino entrepreneurs can benefit all Americans. First off tonight. Alerts by gunshot detection technology used by the Chicago Police Department rarely leads to evidence of a gun crime. That's according to a new report from the city's Inspector General's office. The multi-million-dollar technology ShotSpotter uses microphones and sensors to identify the sound of gunshots and alert law enforcement. But the watchdog report finds that between 2020 and 2021, fewer than 1 in 10 of those alerts resulted in evidence of a gun-related criminal offense being found. Here's some of what the OIG's office told Chicago Tonight last week.
Our report does not speak at all to the question of technological accuracy. I leave that question to others. What we are assessing is operational value, and that is the question of how helpful this technology is to the police department in combating violent crime, even if it's accurate all the time. That is, we wanted to see sort of what we could tell about how often ShotSpotter alerts lead the police to recover evidence of gun crime. And what we found was that only very rarely does ShotSpotter do that. Only very rarely, when responding to a ShotSpotter alert, are the police able to recover evidence of gun-related crime.
Joining us is Fredy Martinez, Executive Director of the Digital Rights and Transparency Advocacy Group, Lucy Parsons Lab. And before we begin, we should note that we did send requests to ShotSpotter and the Chicago Police Department to join us in this conversation, but they did not receive a response. Fredy Martinez, your organization, Lucy Parsons Labs, and the MacArthur Justice Center also released a report about ShotSpotter back in May, but your report focused on its accuracy in detecting the sound of gunshots. Can you give us a quick summary of what your findings were and how they align with the OIG's report?
Right, and thank you. So the Inspector General report was actually found that the rate at which police officers were responding to supposed alerts and supposed gun crime was even worse than kind of the analysis that had been done by MacArthur Justice Center. And what it finds is that overwhelmingly, the police are being sent, to these kind of high-risk situations, thinking that someone has a gun on the scene, and they show up and there's nothing for them to do. And when I say nothing, I mean absolutely nothing. There's no shell casings to recover. There's no, there's nothing there, and this creates a really high-risk situation. And this is why people are sort of beginning to question the validity of this technology.
Now, Fredy, Chicago Police and Mayor Laura Lightfoot have both called ShotSpotter crucial to police work and fighting violence. How do you respond to that characterization?
Sure. I mean, the city says that when ShotSpotter works the way that it's supposed to, that it's a game changer. But we don't pay our rent off of the fact that we found $200 on the ground, this week, right? What we need is empirical, evidence-based research into how this technology does and doesn't function, and that's what the IG report really speaks to. It just doesn't work, and so while we will hear narratives that when it works the way that it should, that it's critical for public safety, that doesn't really address the fact that like peer-reviewed empirical studies don't don't really tackle that issue, right? And so to the mayor and to the police department, I would say that like where is that research? Because from what we found so far, it just doesn't work. I don't know how else to describe it to the public.
Fredy, the city recently extended their contract with ShotSpotter through 2023, which sparked protests from activists. Given the questions these reports have raised, do you think the city should be asking ShotSpotter for more clarity and data on how the technology and algorithms work?
So a couple of things. I will say that there were members of the city council who were asking the mayor's office and the police department to understand if they plan to renew the contract, and they were met with silence. So the contract was renewed in secret. And I would also say that there is a provision in the contract that the city could just cancel it at any time, and they probably should. So what I would say is that what this independent IG report found is that this technology just fundamentally doesn't work, and the city should probably just exercise their right to just cancel the contract.
Fredy, setting aside the question of accuracy, do you think any surveillance tech could be useful in fighting crime in communities like Little Village?
Right. I grew up in a little village. I understand the concerns that people have in that community. I had a lot of the same concerns. However, overwhelmingly, what the IG report found was that that Chicago Police Department is changing its behavior based off of this idea of ShotSpotter alerts. So what they're doing is they're using the fact that there were alerts in the past and using that as a justification for engaging in unconstitutional and otherwise illegal stops. So they'll say, there were X number of ShotSpotter alerts in the last week, and therefore, when I'm walking down 26th Street, that gives them justification to stop me, to search me, and to potentially arrest me in an otherwise illegal context. And so, is there a role for this technology? I think what we should really be asking is, what is the impact of this technology as it exists today, and it's being used to justify unconstitutional and otherwise illegal stops? And this is, and I will also say that this is what the Department of Justice investigated 7 years ago. It's a pattern of unconstitutional behavior by the Chicago Police Department. So, I would say that that's how it exists today. So we should leave it at that.
All right. We only have like about 30 seconds left. Fredy, how do you think the use of ShotSpotter affects police behavior once they arrive on the scene?
I think it would justifiably makes them paranoid. I think it makes them really filled with adrenaline. I can't imagine being a police officer and being sent to 60, 70 false alerts a day and thinking that there's any validity to this program.
Well, our thanks to Fredy Martinez.
Thank you.
Up next, Chicago Public School students head back to classrooms. We hear from some parents on in-person learning. Chicago Public School students return for in-person classes on Monday. But what exactly will that return look like in the midst of an ongoing pandemic? Joining us now to share their experiences as parents of CPS students are Michelle Bautista, who has 2 children, a 1st and 5th grader, Ana Santoyo, who has a child going into pre-K, and Norberto Casas, who has a child going into 1st grade. Ana, we'll start off with you, and welcome to Latino Voices. You have a 4-year-old who will be learning in person for the first time. Do you have any concerns regarding this new school year for her?
Yeah, we'll see, right? Because there's parents right now that are organizing for a remote option and really demanding that. We don't want to wait for our children to get sick before that is offered. The virtual academy that we know about, has space for more students to be added to that. And quite frankly, we see mitigations being pulled back right now, and that's not acceptable. As a parent, it does not make me feel any better about the upcoming school year. Seeing our mayor, not prioritize public health in this time is very concerning.
Mm-hmm. Norberto, you have been pushing for the continuation of in-person learning for your first graders since last year. Why is that important for you?
It's not only important to me, it's important to my family, and it's important to my community as well. And the reason it's so important is that when my child was in kindergarten and he was doing fully remote, he was failing. Okay? My child is special needs, and he was failing kindergarten. I would come home sometimes and my wife would be crying because she had reached her wit's end. And to see your child, the look in his eyes like he's losing hope of learning, it triggers something in you to want to make a difference, to know that he deserves a little bit better than a computer screen when he can't even write his full name.
Right.
So that's why parents like myself, we organized and we put pressure to the system, because our children who are special needs, who are grade school, are critical infrastructure, and they have to be in person if the parents choose to do it. And let me tell you, we were first in line.
Michelle, what are your thoughts on the start of this new school year for your first and fifth graders? Any concerns there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that in-person instruction is important. I do think, though, that parents feel anguish about the rising numbers, the lack of vaccination for the Latino adults in the community. It's about 46% right now. And the lack of mitigation strategies, right? Like not just masking and washing hands, but what are the numbers going to look like? When are we going to pull back? I completely sympathize. I have a first grader who also would cry at the screen, and I want him in school as well, but not at the cost of his health. And having to choose that is something that I personally wouldn't do. I would rather have the kids that really need in person to go in and have him hybrid or some other model. The lack of flexibility in the district is what's concerning me, and the pressure as a parent and the emotional strain is real.
Well, a group of parents gathered this morning calling on CPS to keep their promise of weekly COVID testing for all students and staff. Let's take a quick listen.
We want to make sure testing happens every week to make sure that we can keep account and just keep our families safe.
Anna, do you have similar concerns regarding testing in CPS for students and staff?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Do you have sort of similar issues or concerns about testing in CPS for students and staff?
Yeah, like I have seen, yesterday I went to meet the teacher and actually ask this very question about how that would work. And teachers are still left in the dark about that. I don't know how my child will be tested for that. Of course, I think that should be mandated right now. It's only, seen as a suggestion, right? Like you're suggested to get tested weekly. Yes, they will provide that. But that is also something that, I've seen like CTU fight for to have that, and to have that mandate, is actually not enough when you do see even in communities for age groups that do have the option to be vaccinated, anybody over 12 years old. For Black students in Chicago, that's 12% that are currently vaccinated. So those mandates aren't enough even, and testing, of course, I think should also be mandated for the safety, and along with contact tracing and other mitigations that really need to be mandates and not suggestions.
Mm-hmm. Michelle, are there any challenges you're anticipating for this new school year?
I'm anticipating my children will get sick. I'm anticipating they will be out of school. I'm anticipating I'm going to need to be off of work to care for them. I'm anticipating that I may get sick. I'm about 8 months out from my last shot, so I may need a booster. I agree that the optional testing is not good enough. We have rising numbers. We have lack of ICU beds for peds in the city. Optional testing is not okay. I as well yesterday went to open house and somebody asked a great question. What are we doing? Are we quarantining if we travel? And there was hesitation and not knowing, not for the fact that our teachers aren't working hard, but because these guidelines just came out Tuesday. So everybody is trying to catch up to the last minute planning.
Norberto, how about you? What challenges are you anticipating for this new school year?
Oh, the challenges will be many, okay? The challenges will be many. My child is going to first grade. My daughter, she's 4 years old, and Anna can relate to this. Getting them ready for pre-K is its own special task, because she's gonna be going full-time in person pre-K. So I have 2 children who are elementary age. The challenges will be many, but it's well worth it. And I took it upon myself to read quite a few books that were about past pandemics, because if you've read the past, you'll know how to readily predict the future of past pandemics. It's been a missed opportunity for parents to really educate themselves about past pandemics, what's happened, and how long they've run their course. And we're looking forward to the school year. There is a risk that my child may get sick. There is a risk that I may get sick, but there's a risk in everything in life.
Anna, we just have a few more seconds here, about 30 seconds. With cases of COVID-19 rising, if CPS were to transition to remote learning again, what can CPS do differently to improve the process?
Yeah, they had, it's been a year and a half of the pandemic where they had that to figure out, and they're not even preparing for that. And that is, a real problem too, when we think about the challenges. Nobody should, I feel for listening to parents saying that we should anticipate getting sick. And my child had COVID in December, and the anxiety of the future of her health, it's daunting, and parents and children deserve better.
Well, our thanks to Michelle Bautista, Ana Santoyo, and Norberto Casas. Up next, a tour of a new exhibit featuring more than 20 of Frida Kahlo's original pieces. Stay with us. For the first time since the late 70s, a portion of artist Frida Kahlo's original works are in the Chicago area as part of a new exhibition. Arts correspondent Angel Ito recently took us for a visit and gave us a closer look at how Frida Kahlo's life influenced her work. Here's another look.
While she's known as one of the most influential Mexican painters of our time, a new exhibit honoring the late artist hopes to tell stories not commonly shared of Frida Kahlo.
The idea behind this was to give people context to her life, who she was, her influence, and not only about her, but what was going on in that period.
The first portion of the exhibit tells just that, a breakdown of who Kahlo was before she became an artist, leading up to a moment that would arguably define her work forever. A severe bus accident would require her to have more than 30 surgeries and force her to wear corsets for the rest of her life. But it was in her recovery period that she found ingenuity within her developing craft.
This is a recreation of the bed that Frida Kahlo painted some of her earliest self-portraits in, all with the help of a mirror.
Think about this young 18-year-old girl that's confined, it's vibrant and depressed. They created an easel that she could use while lying in bed. And they put a mirror underneath the canopy so that she could see herself. And so she started painting self-portraits. And she said, I often paint self-portraits because I am so often alone. And I am the subject I know best.
Now, once visitors have gotten to know the woman behind the artist, they're encouraged to use that knowledge to better interpret 26 of Kahlo's original works, borrowed from the Dolores Almedo collection.
Everyone can recognize the eyebrows, the clothes, the hair pulled up, but those are very superficial. kind of exterior representations of who she was. I think the opportunity to see these actual works in person is an opportunity to get as close to hearing Frida tell her own story. She speaks very directly and honestly about the challenges in her life. That has an honesty and an intensity that's coupled with the intensity of the images themselves, so it's almost like they're supercharged.
But the figures in her work are so recognizable, many argue that Kahlo's style was based in surrealism, an idea she rejected. But it's because of the stories within her stories that curator Justin Whitty describes her style as symbolic realism, most notably seen in her broken column self-portrait.
You have Frida exposed, the center of her chest kind of opened up, and you see in replaced of a spine, a column that's been shattered and cracked and is barely holding on. And then she herself and that column are kind of held together by this medical corset. And then on top of that crumbling, fragile column, you have Kahlo's head staring out at the viewer. And although she has tears coming out of her face expressive of the pain that she's in, her look is in no way resigned to the pain. And it's unapologetic. She did not run away from these realities in her life. She did not try to diminish herself because of them. And she was an incredibly strong, powerful woman and artist who spoke truthfully through her work, even when that truth was painful.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
And you can check out the exhibit Frida Kahlo Timeless until September 12th at the Cleve Carney Museum of Art, located in the Mackinac Arts Center in Glen Ellen. When it comes to starting small businesses, Latinos lead the way. A research study from the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative says Latinos are starting small businesses at a faster rate than the national average, growing 34% over the last 10 years compared to just 1% for all other small businesses. But Latino entrepreneurs often still find themselves shut out of the financial resources they need to get going. Here, National Louis University School of Business Dean Ignacio Lopez gives us la última la palabra on why he says supporting Latino entrepreneurship can boost America's good fortunes.
I'm Ignacio Lopez, the Dean of the School of Business here at National Louis University. The School of Business recently reinvigorated itself this past year, launching on July 1st, with a focus on building confident, culturally relevant leaders within our city of Chicago, but across the country as well. The Centro de Excelencia here at National Louis University is really a place for our students to come and build community, right? So we learned early on in listening to our students that, especially our Latinx community, that they wanted a place to be heard, to connect, to sort of be inspired. And I think what we're seeing is a need for supporting entrepreneurs that may struggle, sometimes feeling a sense of bias or sometimes a sense of discrimination. Our Latino students and Latino leaders are saying, you know what, I'm done with that. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna go off and start my own business where they can be their own boss and be successful. We should be investing in the minds and energy of our Latino entrepreneurs. The fabric of small businesses in the city of Chicago gives our communities identity. We, as those that live in the community, we want to see our small businesses do well because we know who owns that record store, or who owns that, barbershop, or who owns the bodega. The stat is from Stanford University saying that if we invest in our Latino-owned businesses, in our small businesses across the country, currently there's 400,000 minority-owned, Latino-owned businesses across the country. If we can grow that to be compared to the non-white counterparts, we can see an increase in over 5.3 billion new jobs across the country and $1.5 trillion back into the U.S. economy. So this is an American thing, right? This is for all of us, for the U.S. economy. So my call to action for everyone listening and watching is invest in our small businesses, invest in the Latino community. We need relationships, we need networks, more organizations like National Louis University who are willing to look and understand biases and understand discrimination, systemic racist practices. We need organizations to say, wow, we know those things exist and we want to combat that because we want our Latino entrepreneurs to be successful. And if you're a partner organization or university, let's work together, right? Let's look at how else we can grow our Latino small businesses in the city of Chicago and across the country.
And you can watch more in our La Última Palabra series on our website. And that's our show for this Saturday night. Join Brandis Friedman tomorrow night for Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. As the Supreme Court ends the latest extension of the eviction moratorium, what actions can concerned tenants take? And a new program that brings together police officers, community leaders, and kids to play sports. And you can catch my reporting on 91.5 FM WBEZ. I'll be back here next week in the host chair again. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, I'm Michael Puente. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy, stay safe. Buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm named on the 2021 expertise list of the best personal injury attorneys in Chicago.